Okay, let's get into our deep dive today. We're focusing on Ezekiel chapter 35. It's a really intense chapter, this one. A prophecy aimed squarely at, well, a single target.
That's right. And the target identified right at the start is Mount Seir,
Yeah.
which, stands for Edom. The nation descended from Esau. They had this long, often difficult history with Israel.
And the core message, it jumps right out, doesn't it? God is against Mount Seir. Very direct.
Incredibly direct, no mincing words.
And the source is pretty clear about why. It doesn't leave you guessing. It lays out several reasons. First off, it mentions they harbored an ancient hostility.
Yeah, that phrase, ancient hostility, it really suggests something deep-seated, not just a temporary conflict, but like generations of bitterness.
Right, ingrained antagonism towards Israel. And
Exactly.
this hostility wasn't just simmering, it became action. The text says they delivered the Israelites over to the sword at the time of their calamity,
Hmm.
specifically the time their punishment reached its climax.
And the timing there is just, it's brutal, isn't it? They didn't just oppose Israel when Israel was strong. No, they actively took advantage, piled on when Israel was already facing disaster, probably referring to, the Babylonian exile, Jerusalem's fall,
Hitting them when they were completely vulnerable.
at their absolute lowest. That's what makes it stand out.
Then there's another reason giving, quite starkly. Since you did not hate bloodshed, bloodshed will pursue you.
Which points to, well, almost an affinity for violence, or at least no aversion to it. And the text links that directly to their own fate.
Interesting connection. Okay, so beyond acting against them in their suffering, there's also this element of coveting, wanting their land. They apparently looked at Israel and Judah and said, these two nations and countries will be ours and we will take possession of them.
Yes. And right after that, the text throws in this powerful line, even though the Lord was there. It really highlights the audacity. Planning to seize land God promised to Israel, almost like God didn't matter or wasn't watching. Total defiance.
And it wasn't just thoughts or plans, they voiced it.
Mm-hmm.
The source quotes them saying things like, they have been laid waste and have been given over to us to devour. And even more directly, aimed at God, you boasted against me and spoke against me without restraint, and I heard it.
So it wasn't just trash-talking Israel. It was like direct arrogance towards God himself, contemptuous words. And that phrase, I heard it, it really emphasizes that God was paying attention to every single boastful, unrestrained word. Nothing missed.
Wow. Okay, and there's one final reason mentioned which feels particularly cold. It says they rejoiced when the inheritance of the house of Israel became desolate.
Yeah, actually celebrating. Taking pleasure when another nation, especially God's chosen people, suffered total ruin. That really speaks volumes about their heart attitude. A profound lack of empathy, aligning themselves with destruction.
So you put all that together, the deep hostility, the opportunism, the coveting, the arrogant words, the rejoicing in ruin. What's the outcome? The prophecy describes a complete and utter judgment for Mount Seir, there to be made a desolate waste.
Total devastation, lasting destruction.
Their towns become ruins, uninhabited, forever, it says, no one coming or going.
Cut off completely. And those mountains they were so proud of.
Filled with the slain, it says, given over to the bloodshed they didn't hate. It's almost a mirror image.
A very stark, very complete reversal. Reflecting the desolation they celebrated for Israel, its total ruin.
And throughout this description of the consequences, there's that recurring phrase.
Ah, yes. Then you will know that I am the Lord.
Repeated several times.
Right. And it suggests this isn't just like random punishment. The execution of this very specific judgment for these very specific reasons, it serves as a revelation. Through their own downfall, Edom, and maybe others watching, would be forced to recognize who God is, his power, his justice against these particular kinds of actions.
Okay, so stepping back from this specific ancient prophecy against Edom, what's the takeaway for you listening now?
Well, maybe the starting point is to ask, what does the severity of this judgment tell us?
Yeah.
It forces you to consider the weight the source puts on those specific reasons we discussed.
Right, that deep-seated hostility, taking advantage of weakness, wanting what isn't yours, those arrogant words, and maybe especially that rejoicing in someone else's failure.
Exactly. It kind of prompts reflection, doesn't it,
Oh,
of our own
definitely.
attitudes towards others, especially when they're struggling. And it makes you think about the power of our words, our desires, that temptation towards, schadenfreude, taking pleasure in others' misfortune. The text implies these things are taken very seriously.
So this deep dive into Ezekiel 35 really paints a stark picture. It shows specific actions stemming from hostility and malice, and the incredibly severe consequences laid out.
And maybe the thought to leave you with is this. Consider how those ancient patterns, that deep hostility, exploiting vulnerability, boasting, celebrating downfall, might show up today, maybe in different forms. What does the intensity of the judgment described here suggest about how seriously the source material views that kind of malice?